Firstly, welcome to my panelists, who I'll get to in a second. Thank you very much for joining me. And thanks to everyone who's joining us as a participant tonight, not just from around Queensland as we would normally have, but from around Australia. So welcome to everyone. We are being recorded for the benefit of other members who can't make it tonight. Don't know what their excuse is, but we all made it. You will have the ability to ask questions through chat. Also, if everyone could just mute their mics when I guess that would be the easiest. Is that right? Just so there's not feedback and so forth. So you will have, if you're a panelist, you will have the ability to ask questions via chat, which I'll be looking at occasionally, and also I think there's a facility to ask a question verbally, but we'll see how we go. I'll be in command for a little while, so sit back and relax. So I've got a bunch of questions I want to find out, and then I'll throw it over to the participants of the audience to find out more. Before we get into it tonight, I do have a little bit of an announcement to make, if technology allowing, and it allows me to actually see my screen. It's quite fortuitous, coincidental, synchronous, a bit of synchronicity that we are actually doing an Audible panel, an Audible related panel tonight, because coming this Wednesday is an announcement from the AWG about a really exciting new competition that's being launched in the realm of audio drama and fictional podcasts as well. So it's called On Air. There's two steps to it. There's going to be a competition. The full announcement will come on Wednesday, but I've been given permission to give a little bit of the heads up on it. The competition launch, the announcement will be made on Wednesday, the competition and a panel to sort of like segue us into the competition will be next Monday, the 4th. So keep your eyes peeled for announcements and social media and your inbox from the AWG letting us know about this. So the initiative's called On Air, and the AWG has organized this with Audible. An entrant will be able to submit an audio pitch to be judged by industry professionals, and the In Conversation panel will cover the basics and practice of audio writing. We'll cover some of that tonight, of course. So this is a nice sort of intro even to the In Conversation panel for On Air next week. So you'll get a nice 1-2 punch of writing good audio drama. I keep saying audio drama, but the competition is actually open to factual and non-fictional audio podcasts or writing as well, or series, I guess. So yes, the competition will be open, and this is the amazing thing. The competition is actually available to all strata of AWG members, so full, associate, and students. So it's pretty inclusive. It's a great initiative, and the winners will share in $20,000 of development funding to help develop their audio pitch into a full treatment and Bible, and then that might be eligible for full production, or not full, further. Remember, I'm being recorded. Further Audible production funding. So it's an excellent initiative. Announcement coming on Wednesday. Competition launch next Monday, and there'll also be an In Conversation panel to sort of help kick off the competition as well, and that will be with legendary podcasters Mark Fennell, Dan Illick, and Casey Anning. So great way to kick into that initiative. Excellent. All right. Oh, yes. Well, we've got some confident people already saying they're going to win. All right. Well, may the best person win. All right. Now, welcome to my panelists here. Excellent to have you all along. I will get you to introduce yourselves, but we're here to celebrate and dig deeper into your successes with Beyond Strange Lands, which is an audio drama through Audible. No small feat to get anything up at any time in this country, and yet to have a work like Beyond Strange Lands, and then have it #2 in the sci-fi charts, beyond just below Outlander, correct? And you beat Dune as well. And then you're sitting, I don't know if you still are, but you're sitting around 20 on the overall charts for Audible as well. So congratulations on that.
We're number 10 tonight.
Number 10, awesome.
6 over the weekend.
You'll be one. You'll be
Six on the
peaked at
weekend.
6 so far.
yeah, you'll be won by the end of it. So that's all good.
We haven't, yeah.
But congratulations to everyone on that anyway, and we'll dig deep into what made it such a great little show anyway. So let's introduce our panelists. We have Simon Taylor, writer and co-creator. Hi, Simon.
Hi.
And there's Hans. Hi, Hans. Hans the dinosaur. Hi. Then we've got David Peterson, also writer and creator. Hello.
Hello.
We've got the director, Hannah Ariotti.
Hello.
And the producer, Danielle Redford. Hi,
Hi.
guys. Welcome, and thank you very much. And just so I can shut up for a minute and have a drink, coffee, I swear. It's a bad time to give up drinking, but I'm just drinking coffee at the moment. I'm sticking on it. So this will be the most sober AWG chair that I've done. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself to others who aren't from Queensland. I'm Shane Armstrong, I'm the screenwriter. I'm on the board of the AWG, and I'm the executive rep for Queensland. So can we please just go around, and we'll start with the writers. Simon and David, if you could just introduce yourselves, just a bit of a rundown on who you are and up to this point of making Beyond Strange Lands, and then we'll dig into the making of Strange Lands. So just bring us up to that point. Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here?
You go first, dude.
I'm David. I've sort of segued into film and TV from about 10 years ago now, I guess. I started at GFS, Griffith Film School, in 2010, graduated from there in 2012. And before that was a computer programmer, still do that from time to time, and have done some producing, editing, and more recently, more writing.
Right.
I'm Simon. I'm a Brisbane, was that a door?
It was a door. A doorway to the imagination.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, my name is Simon. I'm a Brisbane writer. This is my full-time mental health care at Hans, and together we're writers up here. We graduated from Griffith 2 back in 2011. I honestly can't remember. But yeah, we do a lot of stuff. It's fun, and only cause trouble some of the time.
Right.
I guess we could add, like, Simon and I sort of started working together in 2014, mid 2014, I guess, is when we really started working together on a feature project at Griffith in our master's program, and we've kind of been bashing stuff around ever since.
Okay.
We shared rooms together in South Korea, kind of been nutting out ideas and trying to find food which was yummy at the convenience store.
Okay, so
like one of those sitcoms. 6
years of collaboration. That's longer than 95% of collaborations between writers tend to last.
It's a beautiful marriage, really.
Yeah, we'll get to the bottom, and we'll get a mental Polaroid of that marriage a little bit later. So Hannah, what about yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself to the rest of the.
I am a commercial and narrative director. Over the course of about 10 years, I've worked in lots of different industry sectors and narrative genres, different styles. I've worked in lots of different departments over that time too. I've been in the art department, editing, producing, sort of had a very winding, a lot of variety in my career.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think that's a career in the film industry.
Yeah, I love it. I'm really grateful for it. Yeah,
we do it for the big bucks and the stable job security.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Danielle. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm so scared to unmute because my neighbours have just decided to start singing "My Heart Will Go On" from the Titanic in a voice I've never heard in the neighbourhood before, and playing drums. So speaking of beautiful marriages,
it's a soundtrack.
Amazing. Yeah.
My husband's just closing out all the sounds in the house, so apologies if it's a little chaotic for a moment. This is fun. I am a producer who has a history so far of working in distribution and sales, which I think is actually what really brought me into audio as an interesting form, because when you live and die by results on a spreadsheet and you're like, but it's, and no one cares about the buts. It's like, okay, well, what can we do about that? How can we find ways to increase the value of the stories that are really important that we as Aussies are getting a chance to tell? So yeah, it's been a really fun ride to come into the audio space after, a screen background, and with those two things in parallel, but also to discover that audio is in its own right, its own entire beautiful format that isn't just there to, it's not there just to serve something else. It's a fullness. So it's been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting medium. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I'm Gen X. I don't know if you've noticed the grayness in my hair might have, I'm slightly older than most of you in the panel, but, I grew up listening to things like stories on record and then eventually stories on tape. I won't lie and say I listened to stories on CD. But it was a large part of childhood storytelling for Gen Xers. Did you guys grow up with that kind of thing, or did you listen to audio drama or radio plays or anything like that?
My mum's kind of like, my mum's always been an odd duck, but an odd beautiful duck, I would say. But she sat me down at 8 years old and got me hooked on Doctor Who, the classics straight away. But she also got me to listen to a lot of the old BBC radio drama stuff.
Cool.
So, and then I still remember the first time listening to the War of the Worlds, like the presentation they did, Orson Welles. So yeah, I grew up with it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, great.
Retro.
We had my first Star Wars experience actually was, I think it was like one of those golden books where you turn the page when it goes ding on the tape.
Yeah.
It was like the Ewok Adventure or something like that. So we had a bunch of those like stories on tape where you ding, turn the page.
Your first experience was an Ewok Adventure, and you still continued with Star Wars. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What can I say?
I know, it's one of those things. Well, you were being a little kid when you say they were for you. Oh, admittedly. All right.
It's still weird.
Yeah. What about Danielle and Hannah? What about you guys?
Not really in my house, no. We didn't. I mean, I grew up in a farm. We spent a lot of time outside.
Right.
We didn't listen to the radio really. We didn't watch television until I was probably, 12. So I think I rebelled and was like, I'm going to make television.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, no, we didn't. So this was all very much like me in my adult life as a millennial.
Yeah.
Discovering this as a format and even something that I like to consume. I consume a lot of podcasts. So no, my experience was more as an adult.
Okay. And Danielle?
No, not so much as a kid. I read a lot, and I think even when podcasts were introduced, I remember arguing with my sister that I wasn't going to enjoy the format. I didn't want to be talked at, which is so funny now. But I do have a really early memory of being maybe 8 in the Solomon Islands, actually. And so the only technology that was available in that space was a radio. And after dinner, the family we were staying with would gather around and listen to a story. And I remember at the time thinking, this is weird. And it's so funny that something that I back then thought of as almost primitive, or inaccessible, is now experiencing something that has so much to offer us. And even the science and what happens when you're interesting and when you're listening and you start to dig into that, it's pretty fascinating from a storytelling perspective, but it's something I've only come to 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, I rediscovered it about 2 or 3 years ago. And I think I listen to more podcasts and audiobooks now than I watch new stuff. There's something nice about, particularly when you're hearing something be read to you, there's just something really nice about it, because it feels like it's a very personal experience.
Very one-on-one, isn't it?
Yeah. I agree with Leanne too. That 1979 recording of Hitchhiker's Guide was great.
Oh, I need to dig that up.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I want to listen to.
Okay, so look, you're all Griffith Film School alumni. This is a clean sweep.
Yes.
Tonight, usually I have a smattering in the Queensland panel. Some went to QUT, some went to Griffith, etc. Tonight, all Griffith Film School alumni. How did you all get to? But all, I'm assuming, all in different years and from different strata. I mean, Simon, you're a teacher as well as an ex-student there, and the rest of you are students there were students there as far as I know. So how did you all get to slowly pair up and meet with each other as a team?
Well, David and I, we've been working on Beyond Strange Lands since like 2017, I think. But we had been working with Audible, and then I think last year we started working with Danielle and Hannah, which is really cool. So it was kind of like it was nice because it was like fresh life kind of getting breathed into a new project, because we had just finished all 12 episodes and we're at that point but you get to where you're just like, I have no idea if this is good or bad, and then it just worked that way. It was a weird thing that wasn't planned at all, but it turned out to be really, really, really cool and small worldy.
And if you've had any creative conversations with Hannah, it involves lots of hand flourishes and lots of enthusiasm. So
I don't like to stereotype. I don't like to stereotype, but is Ariotti an Italian name? There you go.
Right. Oh, whatever. I'm proud.
Yeah.
Production's allowed.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Okay, so Danielle and Hannah, you two knew each other. You were a bit more tight with each other, and then David and Simon were a bit more tight with each other. Is that kind of?
Yeah. Hannah and I have worked together in a number of capacities now, basically since the first day we met and decided that we would, because that's where we became very close friends. But this project was really interesting because neither Hannah or I normally work from a space where writing is finished when we become a part of it. And this really turned into kind of I don't even know the right word for it. The writers in the room can solve this for me, but there was an organic way that this unfolded where I was in conversation with SQ about ways that we could look at this as an audience tool, and David and Simon had already worked with Screen Queensland and with Audible to write this story, and it was kind of sitting there ready to go. So then it was really fun to then immediately be thrust into this production kind of mindset. And when I was reading it, I was like, okay, outback, fantasy, adventure, sci-fi, action, Hannah Ariotti. And because it was, it was a really big question of the writing is such an integral part of this, but then to figure out even how to direct something like this was a process. And so, yeah, it was a really interesting experience, I think, from every angle of the production process to bring those different skills and experiences into it.
Okay. Danielle and Hannah, had either of you been taught by Simon at Griffith, or either of you taught by him?
I graduated 2010, so I think I was just the year before Simon. We met.
Yeah.
Simon and I have known each other for a while, just in different sort of circling each other.
That was a few beards ago.
Yeah.
I think we all either teach there now or have taught there, if I'm correct about that. It's all very,
Danielle and Simon and I kind of crossed over in the masters.
That's right.
Oh, I forgot I did that.
Yeah.
You forgot that postgraduate degree you did.
Trying to erase it from your memory.
Yeah, mine's totally finished. It's fine. Everything's great.
Good. David and Simon, let's just talk about the genesis of Beyond Strange Lands. And it wasn't always called that, was it? It had a former title. If you want to tell us about that as well, but tell us what was the inspiration and the genesis and of you two working together, and how it all came together as kind of a pitch, I guess.
Well, what was the first title, Simon? Simon actually pitched it to me as a slightly different version that he'd been working on for a year or two. So what was your original incarnation?
It was Grant Heater's Amazing Adventures. Like, it was, because originally the show the idea came when researching for another project, but like I rewatched basically all of the Bush Tucker Man in the night on YouTube, and I was slightly obsessed, and I thought it'd be cool. What happens if there was like a molder who was running around in the 80s with like the Bush Tucker Man was, and yet he disappeared. And then the original story was this, it was pretty much all online. I was pitching an online show that had the 80s show was in full episodes, which was screening, like, I was hoping to get them screened on ABC. And then there was the interactive website where people put clues together about what happened. And then it became a TV show. And then when Screen Queensland did a audio pitch back in 2017 to work with Brian Reed, and David and I just got together, and the show really changed to what it was because Fiona and Ethan were introduced, and kind of the main story. So it just went from a kind of a quirky idea to something more fulfilled. And then from there, we've just kept developing it. But the big turning point was turning it into deciding for it to be an audio series. And it just fit really well. Like, it was just a nice fit. And at the time, I had just finished listening to Limetown as well, and then S-Town too, which was awesome. I was just like, oh hell yeah, I want to do something like this. And then pitched it to David, and then we got together and retooled the concept.
Okay. And look,
And we put a picture in the Screen Queensland. This is the cool part. We put a picture in the Screen Queensland, like a 1-minute video. We got a couple
Audio.
of our lectures audio. I remember David got a call the second day going, "Is this real?" Because we treated it as like a real found thing, and they all thought we had to break the news that it was all fiction.
well, that's cool. You Blair Witch them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good.
that's always funny.
Yeah. Was there ever a temptation to kind of go that way to make it, almost a faux?
That was one of the initial. That was kind of the initial idea. Yeah. It was sort of, we're going to try a found audio kind of thing where Ethan was going to essentially be like making a podcast, and this would be kind of his podcast. But it got a little, once we started actually trying to put pen to paper, it was challenging to make it work and try and find reasons for him to always be recording in these situations. So
what we did is
around that time we came across this binaural recording technique and thought that would be an interesting way to take it as well. And that really suits more of a cinematic kind of feel. So
just explain that.
Well, binaural is, you'll hopefully get a chance to hear a little bit of it. If you've been listening with headphones, you'll have heard it as well. But essentially, it's kind of mimicking the way that sound hits your ears, which is why you need headphones. But it lets you position stuff in the real world a lot better than just playing stereo.
Right. So you can get a better idea of distance and things approaching. And
you pick up the environment a lot more.
The blocking of the characters,
all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So then we started retooling the show as a TV show with no camera. So
okay.
And then went from there. We also rewatched the X-Files, and we're like, it'd be so cool to have like a X-Files with a mum and a son.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to ask what yeah, sorry, David.
I was going to say Danielle and Hannah can probably comment on whether that was helpful for them or not, or if it just made life more difficult in the recording room. I don't know.
Which part?
The way that we ended up sort of writing it as sort of a TV show without a camera.
I mean, one thing that actually really unlocked the methodology of it, which Hannah really leaned into, is we worked, sorry if I'm jumping ahead here, Shane, but on the binaural front, when David first mentioned that to us, it was something that felt difficult. Like, are we going to be able to pull that off? And we worked with Folklore Sound, who are in West End, who are just absolutely incredible. And the conversation we had with them is they said, treat us like we're your DP. And so instead of kind of, bringing just a screen thing where we're going, oh, it's audio only, the moment that the mic became the perspective and the control measure, that really shifted that for us. And in our understanding, it became much more natural and really fun. And so figuring out how to do the binaural also then led into welcoming our talent into a space where they were bringing more of a theatrical performance, and they weren't shoved in a booth. They actually were in the biggest mixing room in the studio. Sometimes we had 6 people performing at once, one from Sweden and one from Melbourne on top. So it was a really different thing because of the way that I think David understood the tech that then you, Simon and David, brought into the writing. It was like you'd laid all the seeds for that, and we just had to figure out how to pick them up and do that.
Yeah, I actually missed the question, David. Sorry, my internet cut out. Were you asking whether writing it for binaural was helpful?
Whether it made it harder or whatever for you. I mean, even just the way that we sort of staged it as, someone in the room listening, essentially, that's kind of the way we staged it, even if binaural didn't work out. I
would say it was even more than helpful. It was just like, there wasn't an opportunity for it to be anything but that. For me, I knew that was what the vision was, and we sort of picked it up and ran with it. We did have to figure out, what is this? How do we do it? How does it, we're filmmakers. How do we adjust our process? How do I adjust my process as a director to that idea of this microphone being the camera, really? But no, it was more like, I think the fact that you had that in mind from the outset was what gave me both the creative constraints and the creative freedom to sort of develop even a new style of directing and actors. We created a shorthand that was new for all of us and very specific to this project and to the recording booth, that was really fun to work with, and like really fast, really responsive. It was like we blended this like almost a theatre style of you're performing around the microphone, and you do get to use the space, because we can hear you when you leave and you say goodbye. We can hear that you're actually leaving. Yeah, it really, like, I think it made it so much more than what it would have been if we just had sound effects on a page and had wanted to do that. Do you know what I mean? It was more than just helpful. It was like, that's what gave it the life that it's got.
It's always nice when a crazy idea works.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think even from a scripting perspective, I don't know if you guys did this on purpose, but the way that you were drawing attention wasn't just about setting a scene and then playing dialogue. You use those FX moments to make sure that you were doing what you would do to write for a close-up, you know, and not suggest how to direct on the page, but make sure that the moment was there. So, I mean,
yeah, that was really tricky.
Yeah, but you did it really well.
It was really interesting, because when we started working with Audible, we obviously kept getting notes back saying that we were too visual, and it was like we didn't understand what sound was and how it worked, and it was true. So we had to kind of retrain ourselves to just focus on sound rather than vision. But at the same time, we had to keep in mind that it was being watched. So we would, when constructing scenes, we'll kind of find an object or a thing to really base them around, and then block out the action with the characters from there.
Yeah, that's screenwriting 101 that we get hammered into our heads, isn't it? That, you know, show don't tell, but you don't. You have to show a completely different other way. And
my proudest moment is getting a note from a script editor when I first started going, this is not going to work. You got to say what's happening. Like, there's a gun in someone's hand. You got to say there's a left gun. When I finished one of my drafts of say 12, I got to go note going, this is too expositional. And I was like, yes. I went in the complete opposite direction, and it took us a while to figure it out. The show was originally meant to be like 10 1 hours, and then we discovered that we could do it like the old Doctor Who episodes, so we could do half hours, but 1 hour broken in two. And it allowed us for each episode to be a distinct genre. It's like one was kind of an adventure kind of piece, one was a black comedy, and one was like kind of horror. So once we made that decision, it made it kind of really easy. And then we just went with the Monster of the Week format around that. And then we had a long treatment.
That evolved a little bit.
Yeah. Just for those who haven't read much about the show or haven't listened to it, just give us the logline pitch, and then maybe we can listen to the trailer. Is that still something we would think you've done?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, and maybe a couple of scenes too, and we can go from there. We've got some really good questions coming in already about our formatting and some process, so we might come back to those in a minute. And then just a reminder to any attendees, if you want to put your question into the Q&A, we'll get to those pretty soon. Okay. Yeah, let's hear. Just give us the setup for the series, and then maybe we'll listen to the trailer to hear it for ourselves, to hear it with our own eyes.
You want to do it, Simon?
Oh, sure. So basically, there was this dude in the 80s called Grant Peters. He was basically Mulder, but he went about filming a show about paranormal activity. So he went out with a film crew in the outback and filmed stuff. In 1982, he vanished without a trace, and no one was able to find him. Our story picks up years later when his daughter, a paramedic, and her teenage son discover the audio tapes of the audio from the filming. And then they discover that he may be alive. So the whole series is about them tracking him down while solving paranormal mysteries. And then they learn that all the paranormal mysteries are connected by this uber alien evil dude. Spoilers. And it goes there. But it's like, it's kind of like, I like to put it as, I like to always picture it as, it's the X-Files, but instead of FBI agents, we have a paramedic and a teenage son. And they're at the core of the show. It's about family and these two as they go along. And yeah, that's in a nutshell. I think that's it.
Yeah, cool.
And then you meet heaps of cool monsters like ghosts and stuff like that.
I want to come back to this idea of, what you just touched on there about it being pure sci-fi. I'll come back in a second. Let's hear the trailer and maybe a couple of clips, and we'll come back.
Yeah. If you guys want to mute yourselves, I'll get this going.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Today, we have captured our first true glimpse of the paranormal.
December 6th, 1982. What happened?
Looks like Melissa was meeting Lucas.
Mum, what is it?
He says he can lead her to Graham.
What? Granddad's dead.
What the hell is that? Guys, I'm picking up something weird on my line.
It's a meeting.
Gran, get back in the car.
I'm the only one who can find Graham.
Listen, I'm gonna find you.
Beyond Strangelands, an Audible original podcast.
Very cool. Will we have a listen to a clip from the actual show?
Sure.
Okay.
So this will be from the first episode.
Great.
Where things start to go wrong.
Lucas, why did Melissa never mention you? Or this TV show, for that matter?
You'll have to ask her.
Oh, I'm glad to.
So how did you find Gran this time?
Honestly, Facebook.
The wonders of the digital age.
And then you arranged to meet in the middle of nowhere?
I was trying to jog my memory.
What do you remember about Graham's disappearance?
Just a storm, darkness, growling.
That's it?
What makes you say he's alive?
More of a gut feel.
Is that?
Noises on the tape.
Ethan, stay with me.
That's Min Min.
Lucas, mate, what's wrong with you?
That's 3, 4. We need to get out of here.
It's too late, they're fucking everywhere. We're stuck. Lucas, stay with us, mate.
Mum?
Oh shit, he's passed out. Fiona!
Singing. Wait. Don't go.
Mum? Where are you going?
Don't go.
Mum, wait, stop!
Nice. Very good. All right.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, does sound cool. If you say so yourself. Sounds awesome. So one thing I wanted to touch on with it being science fiction, you've probably all heard me bang on many times that and bemoan that in Australia, in our TV and in our features, we just don't do a lot of pure sci. We don't do a lot of pure genre. We sort of like hybridize it with, or not even hybridize. It's often drama with dribblings of genre, rather than embracing it full on. But you can do it in audio, obviously. There's horror audio dramas, there's science fiction, there's fantasy. It's absolutely pure, and you can punch above your weight for a little team. Not that it matters, but a small team, first timers from Brisbane, can beat out Dune as an audio drama. So it just goes, you can fight on the in the world arena and do it very well. So is it purely, and I think this is something off, Jason Reed's got a great question here. I will get into the questions from the attendees as well. Jason says, did the audio format offer more opportunities for what you could achieve rather than what might have been possible for TV? I'm thinking that's to do with what's possible as far as effects go. Sound effects can deliver stuff effectively, but very cheaply compared to visual effects. And, just your thoughts on the ability to do something as pure sci-fi rather than in TV, you probably wouldn't be able to do something like that. So do you feel that the format actually gave you a lot of freedom as far as genre goes and what you can achieve?
Yes and no. It does allow you to, it gives you a great creative sandpit to play in. That's no doubt. But when you're writing it and even producing it, it still has limitations or things to stop you. I mean, one of the biggest is what we had to learn was that things which we consider to be sounds or a good sounds don't really transition to audio at all. So like when we write a tree falls down, you can't really hear it, or punching apple saying the same thing as a vampire biting into someone or whatever. So it does limit you in what you write. Like, for example, I wanted to put way more animals in there and animal noises like evil kangaroos and undead birds and stuff, but they just didn't translate to sound at all. And that was a learning curve. The other thing too as well, it's like you still you can write crazy episodes, but I think one of the biggest lessons that I'm taking away from the series and watching a production is like you still have to keep your cast numbers under control and think about budgets. Like you can't write 30 odd characters in one episode. You have to keep it really, really tight as well. So yes, in one way it's fantastic because we're able to do a sci-fi series, but like there's still stuff which you need to keep in mind with it. And it's really fascinating. I mean, yeah.
What did Hannah and Danielle, what about from a directing and producing point of view? How does that?
I would say from a producing perspective, yes and yes, because there's just no way that the scope of, we were in the studio for 8 days and recorded over 52 hours. And then to find a way to turn that into the 5.5 hours that we finished with, even the metrics of that are quite huge to find a way through that were harder than we expected. But at the same time, looking at these scripts, there's absolutely no way that unless you had a really strong international finance party at the table that you would be able to tell this story. And so, I think speaking to what you're looking at, Shane, around that sense of what you can play with and the scope of the field, audio just offers something that, if you want to write something set on Mars, go ahead. Mars takes me as much time with our sound design team as it does Earth. So there's a bit of freedom.
I said that.
The one thing that I would encourage, and I know that obviously filmmaking is always an incredibly collaborative thing, but if we didn't have a world-class sound design team who were as committed to the creative outcomes as we were, this project could have easily been indistinct, as Simon's talking about. And so even figuring out what similar kinds of monsters sound like and what good rocks cracking versus bad rocks cracking and what a purple rock sounds like versus a blue rock are problems that we had to solve in the sound design. And so this was a really fascinating process from a budget perspective, pushing that creativity and going, okay, so we know that we want to create audio that is able to sit and compete with people who have been doing it for decades. So what does that look like? What does it look like to work from scripts that, are really broad, have many different kind of locations and characters, and do that in a way that is creating distinction? And I think that it's one thing I'm incredibly excited about with this format is that you can, and a lot of what Simon's talking about, the Simon overcame with good drafting of knowing that a kangaroo was not the most effective like nemesis because of the sound a kangaroo makes. So
I will find a way to make it work.
It's the same. I'm not going to give up on that. It's the same kind of creative problem solving, but on a really different scale. And I even just found it encouraging as a creative to think bigger and to not be going, oh shit, I can't do that shot because it's going to look crappy. So that was nice.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
You go, Simon. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, it was wonderful to hear just the soundscape when listening to the series, because it's like, holy shit, it worked. That's amazing. But it's crazy.
All I can say is, the answer to the question is definitely yes. And for a director who, I'm obsessed with sci-fi, and I'm obsessed with the Outback. So it was a dream come true to get to play in that space. But also it's a very different way to direct, to like literally have a blindfold on when you're shooting, so that you can really, like, it actually helps. Closing your eyes is different from having a blindfold on. Like, you really attune to, oh wow, that performance actually didn't sell that moment for me. And getting to play purely with that one sense to tell a story. I mean, we're all storytellers. So as far as I'm concerned, looking for any opportunity to get a good story into people's imaginations. If we can do a sci-fi that's essentially on the same scale as like a Marvel film, we've got a planet-eating nemesis. If we can do that with just little old us and, in Brisbane, with a world-class audio sound design studio, why wouldn't we jump at that opportunity? It creatively, it's such a fantastic thing for a director to get to do, to be honest.
Great.
I'll just answer your original question, Shane, as well, about the genre, sci-fi particularly. I think the fact that it was sci-fi, like, full-on sci-fi was one of the reasons they liked it, because in audio, sci-fi and fantasy is basically the second highest genre behind self-help. Right. So they were keen to have sci-fi on board, and they're not afraid to take that on.
Well, when you think of it, sci-fi, horror, and fantasy, they're three, when you're even talking cinematically, they're films that really are enhanced by sound design and sound effects. When you see those films in the Academy Awards, they're often there for things like sound design and, it's for the effects and the technical side more often than not.
I think one of the interesting things in terms of genre for the series and writing it was that I'm really a soft sci-fi person, more so than David. Like I would say that David's kind of more, he's more interested in the reality and actually making it work. And I'm kind of like, oh yeah, it'll work. We can just fly with it. And you see that in actual Fiona and Ethan yourself. So a lot of the time that they're arguing over, does this actually make sense or not, is literally us like figuring it out. And I think that works because it makes the show existing as kind of hybrid of both. I mean, but yet again, David's the one who pitched the cane toads idea. So,
It's hardcore science. What are you talking about?
Giant cane toads.
I had a 2-page scene that explained that justified how they became mutants.
Yeah.
Which
and I remember editing that scene. I was just like, David, you don't need to explain it. And then we just kept going and going and going to it turned out to like so small. But it's just interesting having, even in science fiction, having those two different mindsets and how they work together was really cool.
Yeah, cool. We got a question from Chelsea C asking, when you say you wrote different genres for each episode, were Audible okay that there perhaps wasn't genre consistency? Were they embracing and supportive of that, or was it something they balked at a little bit?
They actually asked. Audible were great. I mean, it was really, they actually increased the episode length after the first couple of drafts, but I think they really liked the Monster of the Week format, and each of the monsters naturally felt like a different kind of project. But even if we did different genres, there's still that same consistent science fiction kind of thing going throughout the series. It's just the flourishes were kind of different in genre, but they seem to really like it. So
I'd say it's a subtlety that you'd only, probably as a writer, you'd pick that up more than the general audience so much, as it's not feeling like suddenly you're whirring between worlds or premises.
Yeah,
it's kind of in the same way that like the X-Files would bounce between a monster an episode and then a conspiracy theory episode. So they're all sort of within the same ballpark, but we had freedom to move. But I guess, I mean, one of the things that we did because originally we were going to be doing single episodes sort of, on a single sort of arc, and then we ended up splitting it into two. But one of the things we did was it gave us a little bit more freedom to even tweak it between each of those two episodes to make them feel like a little mini arc between the larger arc. And so, like, for example, the Cane Toads episode, the first one was more of a investigative what's going on kind of thing, and then the second one was like town under siege essentially. So it just meant it was essentially like, you hit the midpoint of your story and then it changes, in the way that we do in a typical 3-act story. It was similar, but we would just have a bit more freedom to like totally, change gears completely and spin it in a slightly
different. And it just allowed that little tonal shifts, and it allowed the characters to dance probably a lot quicker as well, because they're in a slightly different space, so we're looking at it from a different angle. I mean, I'd be interested to see how much of it is just Ethan or is Fiona, but together most of the time, so that helped as well, just those two main characters, I think.
We've got a question about formatting, which I think is a really good basic one. I think I even asked you when you told me you're doing work in this. I mean, I have no idea either, so I think everyone will be wanting to know, seeing this competition.
We kind of went formatting is really tricky. I mean, there's many ways you can do it. With the format we used, Audible supplied us, or we had a look at the scripts for their Alien series, and it's kind of like a hybrid between a film script and an audio script in terms of it. So it was really easy for us as film writers to come in and do it. We tried doing them more.
That was more of a, I don't know if you've seen multicam TV scripts. So it was similar to what you would see as a screenplay, except that We have like all uppercase action and a couple of other little subtleties. But the version we tried with our original draft before we signed on with Audible, we used the BBC's radio drama format, and it's quite odd in that it's got you have like the person's character name, the character name is on the left, and then in the right hand column you have the dialogue, so it's side by side, not name and then dialogue. I think it probably would have been more accurate for sort of
timings,
pages per minute kind of thing than what we ended up with, but who knows, to be honest. But we got feedback from one of the editors at Audible initially saying this is just too long, it's like going to be 45 minutes, and we even got that on some of the final drafts. But I think Hannah and Danielle directed everyone so quickly that it was just like which works for the show. So.
But we use a hybrid format. I mean, there are templates online you can find. Like, I know that the BBC website's got a heap of radio plays in their script archives. That could work for you, but the model we used it just worked for us because it became really easy to go from visual to just audio.
I think,
at least for me.
One of the advantages for having a slightly different format, just so that mentally I could know that I'm in this format and to not think visually. So it's just a visual constructive reminder to me as a writer that I'm writing something a bit different to what I usually write. And so it helped me to not slip back into visual film writing quite as easily.
We've got kind of a 1-2 question here that's sort of like allied. One's from Joanna Zantok, who asks, can you share a little bit about pitching to Audible? What was that process like? And Chelsea C was also asking, you touched on it a little bit, how much feedback did they give you, and what levels of creative control did you have?
Our relationship with Audible started when we put in for... We'd finished it. We worked with Screen Queensland, and with Screen Queensland and their program with podcast program, we developed a pilot and a pilot script and a Bible. Then we entered the competition with Audible. I think it was Audiocraft in Sydney, and it was like a week long retreat, and Mark Fennell and stuff was there. It was great. So we went down there and worked with Audible for a week. And then
it was 2 days, dude.
It felt like a week,
but it was good.
It was good. It was so good I lost track of time. Except Hans was very scared of ghosts because it was in the quarantine place there on the island. And
it's out on there's a peninsula on the harbour. Anyway, it's But yeah, we sort of did. We had a 2 day workshop, so they had a very good idea of what we were doing already, so it was not a typical pitch. And then after that, it took them a little while to hire their new head of original content development. But once he came on board, they basically kind of got back in touch with us, and we met up with him face to face when he was in Brisbane for a trip. And then we wrote
and then we took the process where we wrote a couple other episodes just to prove the kind of concept. And that's the point where we decided to split the episodes in half. And then after that, they asked, we were going to 8 episodes. And then before we knew it, they were asking for 12. So it was kind of like, it was a real natural progression. But in terms of notes, they were great. I mean, they got us working with a English writer, David K. Barnes, and he does a lot of audio stuff, but I was a big fan because he does a lot of Doctor Who Big Finish stuff. So I was really geekily happy. But he worked with us for months there, holding the scripts. And to have a script editor who's actually from that world originally was probably a saving grace. So that process was great. So we finished a couple of drafts and handed it in. I mean, it eventually got to the point where we were both writing the first drafts of drafts and the second drafts, but the back and forth of notes was excellent. And
feedback from Audible specifically, we didn't really get much until we basically finished the series.
Yeah, that was fun.
we finished doing the drafts, and David was happy with it and sent them on to Audible. And then a couple of weeks later, we heard back and was like, we need to cut X number of pages, and we need to change the ending a bit. So yeah, that was fun. But
no, but it was really good. It was really good too, because it was like a different set of notes. Like David's notes were really creative, and Audible notes were kind of more practical. And yeah,
it's like cut out X number of characters because it's going to cost too much to get them on.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
Danielle's grateful that we already cut. We cut a lot of characters before you even got.
I'm confused about what those cut characters are.
It was like little bit pieces, little jokes.
Yeah. There's a lot of small characters.
No one missed it. That's the thing. No one knows the changes. Here's a question for the whole panel. I think it's a really good one from Eli Glastonbury. Do you think podcast audio dramas could become a potential avenue for early career practitioners in comparison to the traditional TV or feature avenues? Because it's so hard to get those things up. Does it? I mean, certainly the AWG initiative on air is open to getting students, associate members, people who haven't got that level of credit. So do you think it's a great avenue for early career?
I hope so.
I'm pretty passionate about this space, because what's happening in the US is that a lot of the bigger studios who have the kind of vertical outputs across streaming and theatrical are starting to build or acquire their own production teams in the podcast space. So they're starting to develop IP in-house. And normally when you look at a model like that, you think, oh, us poor Aussies, we can't afford it. We don't have the infrastructure. And I'm looking at a microphone sitting on this desk. I don't know where to plug it in, but I'm sure I could figure it out. And I think one thing that's interesting about the podcast space is it's not an excuse for poor quality storytelling or production. And we know from film, there's nothing more frustrating than bad audio. It's less forgiving. So it's not so much about, the old grab a Canon 5D and make your first feature film, which worked for like one person. But at the end of the day, to get yourself in an enclosed space in an environment where you can record high level audio is really achievable. And so then the focus comes into what's a story, which I think is something that we should all be doing. And the excuses are removed here of funding models and accessibility and audience. And it's also, if you're interested in this space, I'm forgetting the name of the podcast, Welcome to Night Vale, started as
so good.
A bunch of friends putting something together, and then it grew into something that has completely transformed their creative careers and trajectories. And so the models here for the proof of concept for the short form are maybe a little bit more effective than some of the tools we've used in the past, like short films, because a podcast becomes a product. You can monetize something if it's popular enough. You can place it with someone like Audible, get a commission from there, or look at places that are emerging like Spotify and Apple, and just be much more in a position where you're focused on the craft of the story while knowing that there's still a lot of capacity for that story and that IP to grow. So I think that we have almost a responsibility as Aussies to figure out how to do this really well. And there aren't that many scripted podcasts in the world. I still have friends and family who are not quite sure what I did for the past 6 months. But then again, the binaural, we can only find an example of a branded piece of work for Discovery in the UK. And so to be one of the first in an industry globally to actually experiment with an art form and find the parameters of that, I can't do that in film and TV in 2020. So it's pretty exciting.
I think the other cool thing about the podcast market is that you're not limited in terms of format. Like you can do an audio drama, or you can do a straight kind of true crime podcast, or you can do something a bit more personal. Like there's a lot of freedom in what you can actually do. And I guess that's the really cool thing. So for a creative to get their voice, their distinct voice out there, it's a beautiful place to do that.
And I guess there's also a greater scope as far as the distribution, because, you guys are with Audible, so that's, next level, but you are able to get to an international audience, even if you are sort of doing a kind of a DIY podcast. You can get your stuff out there internationally.
Make a series and post it yourself.
And you guys are building a fan base in the UK, I think Danielle was saying. So so that's great.
The US is on the cards in a couple of months as well.
Great.
So it's a great way to make sure you're getting in front of some bigger markets. But I mean, look, this is going to sound really nerdy for a bit, but there's some really fantastic research in the ABC podcast survey from 2019 that talks about how audiences discover things, and 89% or something like that of audiences choose what they play through the title. And so there's some really easy kind of tools that we can use to actually shape our work to be really consumable. And I think this is an area that it's like, do your research, find your point of difference, and then just kill it.
Yeah. The thing is, good story's good story no matter where it is. And
yeah.
I mean, I guess the temptation is to look at podcast as like a hack to something else. But the format itself presents challenges, yes. But like I said before, those challenges are an opportunity to be creative. And, you know, it's like Simon and David, they wrote a TV show into the script that had lost the visual. So it was, you can't, like, what are you going to do with that on a TV show? That works specifically for podcasts. So they're like thinking with a marketing mindset from even the story development point of view is a really smart thing to do when you're thinking. I mean, we all should be thinking about audience from day dot. And you can do that. You have the ability to do that because you know how people are going to consume this. It's not like a short film where we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know how to get it out to people. There's very real avenues, and you can think about okay, it's limited. People are only going to hear it on their headphones on the train, or they're going to be listening to it when they're washing the dishes. How can I use that and work it into the story? It actually creates a whole lot of creative opportunity that opens the door to just an endless realm of storytelling in and of itself. Yes, it is a great platform to step to other things, but it's a great platform on its own.
Right.
I think what Hannah said about that before, it's like it's one of the lessons we learned. Like, you have to really appreciate the format as well and write content for it. Like, taking a feature and turning it into a podcast. When you do that, you would have to change your podcast version so it suits a podcast a lot more. Like, it's not something you can, it's like a web series. You can't just cut up a long thing and expect it to work. You've got to really respect the form and change your show to suit it. So it's almost like pivoting. And
Hitchhiker's Guide, right? I mean, it started as a radio series and
Homecoming,
book, and became a TV series and became a movie, and they're all different. They all had to change for each medium to be good in that medium. So it's always going to change. And so if we were to do a live, you know, a visual version of Beyond Strange Lands, it would be quite different. You know, we keep the core characters, but it would be quite different.
It'd be very different. I mean, like, to be honest, after working on the audio for so long, the thought of doing a live action version hurts my brain, because I'm kind of like, it's a whole completely different thing. And I think if you're willing to go on that journey and learn the format and let it guide you to what you need to do, I think you can do really well on it.
Right. I've got a couple of sort of like semi-format questions here. Really good sort of question from Michael Olive, who asks, when setting up a scene, like you said, Simon, you stated that there were core elements of the story for people to visualize. Were they usually people who the audience was directed to, like a close-up or a medium shot where every performer was equidistant from the mic or the audience? I guess if I'm getting this question right, do you specify how close someone is to?
There was a level of that, So, I mean, essentially, we tried to adhere to the format which we were suggested from our editors, and essentially we had the tools we could use were near, like, close, off mic, and approaching or departing. And so you try and, so for example, like if someone's coming into the room during the scene, you kind of need to give them a line of dialogue as they approach, so that you know that they're coming into the room. It's just things like that. So, like, a lot of the kind of rewriting stuff that we did was going through and, you know, we get a note, it's like, this person needs to have a coming or a going or whatever, you know, and so we add a line where we can actually hear them coming or going, so that we know what their movement is around the room.
And it's setting the scenes in kind of a central place where you kind of know that, like, for example, in episode 7 with the museum, guiding them through the museum, you do it by what they're seeing and what they're viewing, and you guide them. But at the same time as being aware when you're writing it of where the microphone's going to be. So I'm writing the scene, so POV, most of it's going to be on Fiona, and I'm going to hear a lot of the others off the thing. In cars as well, like knowing it's going to be in the middle of the car, so making your conversation kind of bouncing in the middle. the other big thing is also transitions between scenes as well. Like it's writing it was kind of like you can't do your normal tricks where you cut into something. You have to write the scene out to the full, and it has to have a natural ending, and then you have to start again. It's almost starting like the beginning of the film where you describe where you are and what you're doing and stuff like that. And that was fun to do.
There's a scene. Sorry, Simon. There's a scene in episode 7 where our protagonists are sneaking up on our antagonists who are digging. And that's a really good example of how the writing set up the sound design cues that we took to go, okay, so we're with characters who are whispering at the edge of a cliff. And then we do hear the bad guys off in the distance. And then the next scene we cut into that conversation. And so tricks like that in the transition helped with that seamless effect. And it was quite rare actually that we had a problem when we were in the sound design space of how to transition, because I think you guys had really paid attention to that in the writing.
Yeah, and that scene in particular took about three rewrites to try and get it to work. So yeah,
I think it also it was good because like I know, knowing David and having worked with him so long, I know I could go write this crazy scene, and then he would come in and go, how does this actually work where people are, and working together kind of guide it. But like creatively knowing that my co-writer thought like that helps a lot for me. And
our editor was invaluable in that as well. Like he would be just like, this won't work. You just need to try something else. So
also, as from a writing perspective, knowing what we did in the room, Hannah made mud maps of each scene, which was a shit ton of work and dozens of hours of her life that will never return, but was really worth it, because it meant when we were in the room, the mic, she knew if we were in a bar, she knew where the mic was in relation to the bar and how to quickly communicate that to our cast. Or if it was a scene that there was some choice in the script about whose perspective we were listening to, she would mud map from this kind of instincts that were there in the script to pull in. So I think having an oversight of what happens after the script is done can help you to write, to make it an easier process of like visualize the room, visualize the space, and then create the parameters that we can then work within.
I mean, that's how I wrote it. I don't know about Simon, but I visualized the room that they were in as I was writing it and figuring out, okay, the door's over here, the counter is here, these two characters are here, they're coming in the door. And so I'm trying to imagine it as if you could do that, but then you're kind of stuck with, in some ways, one dimension. We weren't even sure if we were going to be able to do the 3D audio, but even with 3D audio, it's still limited. I mean, you can kind of tell roughly that someone's further away and they're off in this direction, but it's not a detailed thing.
I always imagine it as theater, like that is the stage, and kind of like I think writing it's more closer to writing a stage play than it would be a film, but that was weird to get through.
Michael Olive also has a kind of an interesting question in relation to that as far as the performance goes. He said, did the voice actors perform within stages which blocked or enhanced acoustics, kind of like practical effects for audio? So again, if I'm interpreting the question right, would they stand further away from the mic? Would they stand behind anything, or what kind of tricks?
We definitely did do that. I mean, we were still limited in terms of like space. We had a large recording studio as recording booths go, but I mean, you still have limitations. But yes, straight away, as soon as we realized what we were doing, it was like, we're bringing theater and we're bringing staging into this. And as Danielle said, yes, I had mud maps, and they had the director's actions on it. They had, director's actions. They had the character's actions on it. And we did use, to some degree, we did use props. You're limited with that too, because things like if an actor has keys in their hand, and that's an important effect, they're going to just keep swinging the keys around in their hand because that's what you do. So we were limited to some degree. I mean, we used real food so that we could have, when the characters are eating, you can hear them eating. That changes the way that you speak, right? And things like when they're running away from the toads or running towards the toads, we had them on the far side of the room, and they sort of ran on the spot to get breathless, and then would run up to the microphone as they come into the scene. So yeah, we did stage it. We moved very quickly, and in that staging, there was a set way that I wanted to execute it, but there was also a lot of freedom for the actors to play. And I think that was really important because it brought the spontaneity and the freedom that just brings the script to life. And they really did run with that. Like that was a really, really important part of how we pulled it off. I don't think it would have as much life if it was just, you know, you stand in front of the mic and when you're off, you're off. When you're on, you're on. They moved around it. When we had the casting, I mean, David, I actually didn't know that they'd written it. David and Simon had written it to have the mic in between them. That was how I interpreted it. So it was very well translated. Like they communicated that within the script. But they had it between them and they weren't facing it. They were facing ahead so that it would, when they turn their heads to each other, you can actually hear them. If you're listening to it with headphones, which is the way that you're supposed to listen to it, you hear them turn to each other and you hear them turn away. So then you can add things in like, well, if Ethan's really upset at Fiona, he's not going to be looking at her. He's going to have his face out the window and you can hear that distance. And it's very subtle. Like, I mean, you don't get heaps of detail in that, but if you're engaging with it, you can pick up those sort of undertones.
I think as far as the craft of it, it also allowed space for our actors to feel like they were contributing beyond their voices. We had 24 cast, and in Brisbane we had more than that. And every single cast member left going, that was so much more fun than I expected, because their idea of audio was reading an audiobook. I walked into the studio we were recording in once, and our 16-year-old lead who plays Ethan, Michael Fryer, and Hannah said to me, can I jump from the desk for this scene? And he's pointing to the very expensive mixing desk and the big bags. And I'm like, you absolutely can't. No. And I was the bad guy. But that's the kind of level of like movement that by that stage, Michael knew he had the freedom, apart from jumping off the furniture, to do. And he then started, when we had ensemble come in later, he was the one who was inviting them into the theatrical space. So it was really good for bringing a performance level to the story and the writing.
Cool. Just going to add on a technical level, they used a holophone, I think it was called, but essentially it's got multiple mics set up so that it can record 3D position sound. So that was recorded in the room with sort of 3D position sound, and then they also mic'd up most of the characters with a lavalier lapel. So I don't know how much you use the lapels in the edit. I haven't.
It was a real mix, and often we would let our designers lean into whatever was the cleanest take for that. But sometimes we actually went for the dirty on the 3D mic because we liked that effect more. So we had 3 audio sources, I think, per. It was a lot to get through. Lots of tracks.
Yeah, a lot of thinking.
Kind of got another sort of 2 questions that are interrelated, so I'll ask them. This is again asked by Eli, who says, you've touched on this already, but did you find any particular roadblocks when it came to the process, since you're so used to working with visual formats? And Sam asks if you could also, on that track, could you elaborate more on how you went about balancing exposition while maintaining believability? Do you have any advice for tackling scenes without visuals? So I guess both questions are about, the challenges of writing. Do you want me to play a scene? Yeah, one of the hardest things to write for me anyway was action scenes. So I might play you one, and you can tell us how we did. Okay. Let me see. Should I go with the toads or the lightning monster? What do you guys reckon?
Toads.
Toads. I love the toad.
What's all that hate with the lightning monster?
The toads. Here they come.
Give me a hand with Tyler and keep your mask on.
Coming.
Okay, just grab that arm.
I got it.
And lift together. Okay, I think we're good.
Can you still swing your bat?
Kind of. Wish I was left-handed though.
Okay, let's go. One to your left.
I got it.
Nice.
Don't think I made much of a dent. There, your side.
Got it. Right between those ugly purple eyes. My dad would be so proud.
Just keep them off.
I am.
They're coming in thick.
Watch out! They're spitting poison. Help! Somebody!
Tyler, stop!
Come on, you ugly, overgrown, wart-faced bastards!
Ethan!
Mum? What are you doing here?
We're coming!
What do you think I'm doing?
I have a picture of that scene being recorded. I'm trying to find it. They're actually wearing masks, and when they say grab Tyler, they've got a 6'2" Tyler that they're dragging along and like really into it.
That's amazing. In terms of exposition, I think Dave is right. The action scenes were the hardest to write. There are a lot of action sequences which didn't make it. Like in the lightning episode, that was really hard to do, and the ending probably changed several times because it just wouldn't work in audio. So that was tricky. But exposition, I just came from. It was really kind of. I wasn't worried because it came from Ethan mostly, because Ethan knows absolutely nothing. So whenever we needed to explain everything, it was kind of like get Ethan to say it. But Ethan's got such a little bit of
read something
like
out of Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. Like he would try and prove someone wrong by looking at Wikipedia and looking it up. But embedding a lot of that in his character was good because at the same time, the other tricky thing is we have characters like Christina and Ned Kelly who know the whole story and who are purposely not telling it. And I think half the fun for us was actually omitting that and having them say, yeah, I know something you don't know and I'm not telling you, and just being difficult. So building it into the characters and the dynamics between them was kind of cool. And also putting a lot of breaking the exposition up. So it came through, if you had a conversation between Ethan and Fiona, instead of explaining it all from one character, making a conversation so it's between two people, that was kind of the biggest tool that we had. And then turning it into an argument. And then when you put a couple of in-jokes between them in there, it just kind of makes it hidden.
Making characters argue is like the best way to get exposition out, for sure. And I mean, in things like the action scene we just listened to, you know, there's way more dialogue in there than you would put in a visual scene. But we just tried our best to make it not completely naff, you know. So you imply that Zoe is on the left by saying, "I wish I was left-handed," and you know, things like that, which they're like so. There's no way I'd write that in a film, but you kind of have to. You have to push it in audio just to be able to help people visualize what's going on. And you know, the toad spitting at you, that could be anything. It could have been landing in a puddle. It could have been who knows. So you kind of have to say out loud. Like we just found like the notes we would get back was like, you got to have someone say what's happening. So we just have to, it's a continual amount of like, how do I say this line that doesn't just sound terrible? And you just try and come up with a slightly unterrible version of it.
One of the weirdest workarounds was in episode 4, where Fiona's sneaking into the mansion, but we did it so Ethan was on the Leichhardt, Ethan, the ghost possessing dude, spoilers again, was on the phone with Fiona. So we did it all through the connection of a phone. And like, so coming up with ways like that to do the action through going, shut up, I'm just going down this hallway, or doing stuff like that was really cool. Cars were also our best friend. Like the car was kind of like the home base. So whenever you needed to get somewhere or explain everything, you just put a car conversation in, and it kind of did it. But Ethan was a lot of fun in terms of like, my favorite thing about him was making him slightly a bit overweight and unfit, and then him doing a lot of running, and also giving him asthma and having him on his phone playing games, and all those little things I think kind of helped the action along, because as you go through, you associate it with the character. So the pilots are largely introducing a lot of that. I don't know if that answers the question.
There's a scene that I think is interesting because it's a little different. I can't remember what episode it's in. Christina's sitting by the fire and she's reading a letter that they found from about what happened to.
It's episode
I think
beginning of episode 8.
Yeah, beginning of episode 8.
So she's reading a letter about something terrible that happened at a settlement a long time ago, and it's quite a somber scene, and we've just had a bunch of action, then we're coming down, and so there's a lot of exposition that we need for the story to make sense in that scene, but because it's one character reading for a while, it's easy to get lost. But one thing that the guys wrote in the scripts that we then did in the sound design, which I think worked really well, is it's almost like a flashback sense while you're in the moment. So where you might have cut to some kind of flashback on screen, there's a thematic sound of like tribal beating of drums and kind of sounds that evoke the feeling.
Background sound behind the dialogue.
And it was quite effective, and that's something that that scene and the creeping down the hall scene is something that, you know, in the notes from Audible and the production stage were both really welcomed and loved. So creative problem solving and not doing the same thing every time, I think.
Yeah.
Well.
Episode 8 was honestly one of the hardest episodes. 8 and 12. 12 was difficult because the balance between past and present, but 8 was the hardest one to write in terms of that there's so much exposition in that episode. And it's an important episode because it ties a lot together for the whole series. And finding ways to hide that exposition and make it kind of more physical and put in little goals and stuff. That was a really tough episode to do. I think there's more drafts on that one alone than the others.
Matt V's got a question here. Did you ever, and this is to do with exposition, did you ever consider having a narrator rather than a pure live drama? Did you ever think of having a narrator as a form of exposition device?
No, we had a narrator in there for fun. Like we wanted to do a 1960s presenter at the beginning and end of each episode, but it just makes no sense when you think about it. Anyway.
At the same time, Grant does a lot of exposition in his TV presentation.
It's true, yeah.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a cheat there.
A narrator present throughout until you sort of run into him and meet him in episode 12. So he is a separate from present day voice that does operate as a narrator in some ways, but not really, because he's not
an omniscient.
He's not
omniscient.
He's not narrating present events, so not really.
It was
like I guess the closest we thought about it was when we were considering to be more of a podcast style at the beginning. We hadn't really gotten very far down that pathway, but I suspect we would have had Ethan just doing bits to Mike directly to stitch different things together. But we never really went down that pathway at all, did we?
No. To me, one of the most interesting things was at the start of it, the tapes are such a big part of the show. But as you go down the adventure of the episodes, it kind of cedes away a little bit. Like it still provides narrative stuff with story, but the main characters in the present just take over a lot more. I found that as writing and planning the show, I found that a really interesting progression. And when we get to the point though, I found that the episodes I was doing drafts on had no tape stored. And I was like, is this the main conceit of the show? But it kind of works about it because you've heard the tapes at the start. That was just really interesting.
I've just got a couple more questions. I think we'll might wrap it up at around 9:30. So if anyone's got if there's any more questions from the audience, but I've got a couple. One is just about self-education. You know, we always talk about in film and TV reading scripts to educate yourself on format and how to write cinematically and so forth. Are audio drama scripts readily available online, or do you have to kind of have a conduit through someone like Audible to give you the scripts for Alien Isolation or something like that? And also, are there any books that you're aware of that are handy resources for self-learning?
Initially, self-learning was for us is listening to a lot of. I mean, at the time, there was still not much audio drama stuff except the old BBC stuff or stuff they're doing on BBC. So the first lesson was just getting our head around the audio format. I'll be honest in saying we didn't really look for how to write audio books at all. We looked for scripts and they were really hard to find.
BBC actually has quite a few scripts.
Except that
they're
format.
A different feel in some ways. A lot of them, like you have to. Some of them do feel more like a recorded, theatrical or an old school kind of radio play. There wasn't a lot that was a more naturalistic kind of performed that we came across anyway. They're around, but it was a bit harder to find. But yeah, we did look at some scripts for sure and listen to a lot of stuff like, Homecoming and a bunch of Gimlet stuff. And there was more fiction drama actually becoming available about that time, which was helpful.
I mean, to be honest, our biggest lesson or education stuff was working with David, the script editor. We learned so much just getting notes back and drafts and discussing stuff through. That was really the biggest learning curve. Apart from there was a lot of experimentation of what this would actually look like and sound like at the start that we did, but yeah.
I think that there's something to be said for looking beyond what is readily available in this format and looking at what could be created as a format within a format. Even if you jump on podcasts, I don't even know what to call it now, it's not iTunes, the kind of layers of genres that they have is like intimate personal journey, falls under society and culture. And so all of those existing formats are readily kind of available that could be turned on their heads and brought into either a fiction space or a factual space if you were looking to write with the intent of, developing projects there. And I think that we should be looking where we can to make new rules and to play with the format. And I'm close to finishing the scripts on another project with Audible, not that I'm writing them. And the format we've got with that is a true crime. It feels like a true crime piece, and it's going to very much feel like it's factual, but it's a narrative piece that is heavily styled as true crime, following all of the conventions of a host of interviews, of found audio. And again, a script editor, David K. Barnes, is bringing in his notes, he said, in a real true crime piece, this is how they'd ask that question. And so his intimacy with the format in the real world is what's informing our story kind of parameters. So I think, there's something to be said about making sure you're listening across a really broad range. And what do you like about it? What don't you like? What do you, if you're listening to mostly two people chatting, is there something you could play with in that, like Homecoming did? If you are liking something like the Sandra from Gimlet scripted narrative, is there something that hasn't been done? Millennial is a factual podcast that's a few years old now, but I forget her name. Megan Tan made it as she was trying to break into radio journalism and ended up working for NPR on the other side of that. But that was her like fresh out of college project that is just really beautifully rendered and factual. So I think it's just, play, and figure out how to do it and tell the rest of us how.
The thing which really helped us was doing a treatment for the whole season. And we wrote it as like a long film treatment. And that was really good because once we actually knew what our story was, we were able to go through and experiment with the format more. Like, it's just doing that was great part of the process. And that
was
that
the
took a while
reasonably
to get
detailed, sort of scene by scene in the end.
Yeah.
Like, we sort of started with a higher level one, but we ended up pretty much beating it out scene by scene before we started writing any of the episodes from memory. Once we went through our final pass, so initially we'd sort of done a few episodes just to, we did the pilot, and then we did 3 more just to get a feel. And then we essentially rewrote all of them because we changed the structure, we changed the length and how it was going to break up. So on our final pass through, before we did that, we basically, we did an outline scene by scene, and then we sent that to the editor and to David, and then we did another pass of the outline before we even started writing. So that was definitely helpful in this type of story where it's very much one arc kind of going across the whole series.
Yeah, that was a saving grace, really.
Well, we've got one last question for the whole panel. This is from Daniel Johnston. What was the most enjoyable part of the process that you wouldn't have gotten necessarily from working in a different medium or creating in a different medium like film or TV?
Good question.
Most enjoyable? I don't know. Partly for me, I always enjoy learning something new. So this was definitely a new format and a new way of trying to write.
Learning curve.
Yeah, for sure. Which was, not always enjoyable, but in general, that was probably fun. And I guess just trying to figure out what freedom you do have, even though you have other restrictions. It's like finding your freedom within those different constraints. So that was.
I think with me, it was kind of the same. We talked before, but we were writing and plotting our first 12 episode TV show with relatively low stakes. with notes and training grounds. Like it was really freeing because David and I were never going to produce it ourselves. So that provided us just to really focus in on training ourselves to actually plot a TV show, work out the story, and then write all the parts. That was really, really great. Like as a learning thing. And then it was so liberating not have to worry about actually going through, I'm sorry guys, but like going through and worrying about how the hell we're actually going to do half the stuff we're writing about. It of course it has stressful moments, but there was part of it which was just really freeing. And then and the other special moment is being able to see these guys, Danielle and Hannah and everyone else. We finished our job in August last year, and then we come in and watch the recording, and it's like it has a whole new life. That was a really cool moment as a writer to experience that thing where it becomes something else. That was really cool as well.
Cool. I would say too, specifically different from film and TV. I mean, obviously there's a lot, but one of the things that I particularly enjoyed was, it's funny that we've all said freedom. I hate to sound repetitive, but the freedom in the room, because we developed that shorthand of almost improvisation in terms of the actors' choices, not improvisation with the dialogue, but with the choices that they made. We could, in the middle of the scene, we could just quickly, new choice, and they get to make a new choice in the moment, which as I said earlier, it created this like real lively responsiveness, which is sort of a mecca for actors, that they just get to respond. That's the best place to be acting from, is responding to each other. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that we kind of could just interrupt ourselves if we wanted to and really quickly keep going, because you don't have to worry about resetting the dolly shot or, makeup having to come in and touch up. We could just play. And we didn't have heaps of time. It's not like we were just going crazy to play, but we could be really free with it like that. That was really, really enjoyable, and something that's very unique to the format.
You didn't have to worry about available light. You just, whoever knows what day it is. Is it night? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, just one very, very quick, I said that was the last one, but very quick one from Mr. Aaron Ducker from the Forbidden Zone in Toowoomba. Hi to the Darling Downs, gateway to the Darling Downs from this side of Brisbane. Would you be open to doing a sequel series, or is it, moving on to the next thing?
No, we're open to it. It's up to Audible at this point, basically.
Yeah, we're working on new audio ideas, but we started off with kind of a 3-season plan for Beyond Strange Lands. But I know there's certain stories that I would love to do. Like I would love to do one set in about Grant, set in like a caravan park, and just like little things like that. Something else we'd love to do with seasons 2 and 3 is we really want to bring on a First Nations co-writer as well, so we can tell different types of stories. And really, we touched on it in season 1, but doing that will allow us to do a lot more in season 2. That's something we really want to do. But yet again, it's not up to us, but I would say yes straight away.
Okay, cool. Well, Stu W has just asked a really good question, and I was going to say that's the last question, but this is a good one because I'm curious now. How many recording days did it take to record the series, and how many post days? What was involved in making it?
7 principal recording days, 1 pickup. No, I guess maybe 3 pickup moments when we were going across. We had cast in Sydney and Melbourne as well for some of the cameo roles that we would do some sessions with. Post-production days, all of them, just all of the days forever. It was so much
still happening
than I expected.
Yeah.
Basically, we delivered this project on the 6th of March, and I felt like I had been in lockdown for 3 months, and then on the 16th of March, I went into it. So someone's having a real cosmic laugh at our year. But I
still don't know.
I've got more time in lockdown than I had in post-production. That's for sure.
I think
I still don't know how you did it. It's amazing. Like I remember coming in and dropping.
Determination. We're gonna make.
Yeah, coming in the set, and then on one day you're recording parts from episode 1, and then you jump to episode 7 and 12.
Oh, yes.
It was just amazing because you were able to keep it all in your head.
That's pre-production. I mean, I don't want to take too much more time, but I did so much pre-production to be able to do that. I read the script and did my script breakdowns. I had 4 or 5 times I read the scripts and had a page for every single scene that we were recording that had every single character's, what were they doing before this? Where did we last see them? What are they feeling in this? What's their, every single one, so that there was no one in the room that knew more than I did about what are we supposed to be doing right now. Because it was all over the place, absolutely all over the place.
It had to be, it was a schedule, you know, it's just like scheduling everything else. We had to do it by
so it was like,
cast and by
flip to
type.
the next page. Okay, now we're at episode 10 and someone's just, you know, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but something serious has just happened, you know. So anyway, off track. That's your last question.
I think if you're trying to do rough estimates, I would say that the assemblies per ep, of which there were 12, took an average, you could probably average them out at 7 hours. Some of them took 5, some of them took 10. So that's a big chunk of time already just in an assembly. And then I know that our post house ended up spending a lot more time than they expected. Well, but again, they were as committed to playing. So yeah, there was probably another solid, I would say, 3-4 weeks, but I can't confirm how many staff members were working on the design. And then the mix took us about a week. So it was no small feat.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all your answers tonight. And thank you to the great questions from the participants, or the attendees, our audience. And thanks to everyone who didn't ask a question, but even just turned up to listen to us. It was great seeing you guys, not in the flesh as we normally would. Normally, this is the part where I say, okay, everyone head to the bar and mingle, but head to the fridge and go for it. You know?
I think I got something.
Yeah, well, you know,
I'll bill you, Shane. That's cool.
It's a lot safer with me in lock-in. I'm gonna wake up healthy tomorrow. It'll be good. Yeah. But anyway, thanks everyone for coming along.
Thank you.
And tuning in. Look forward to seeing what you're come up with next. Everyone, Beyond Strangeland's available for your oral pleasure right now.
For free.
For free.
Yeah.
And let's try
With
and get
headphones.
it. Let's try and kick Outlander's ass, kick them down.
Beat Outlander.
Kick them down to Dune level.
And ask for a sequel.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Put it in the review.
Put it in the review if you want a sequel.
No worries. And don't forget the announcement of the on-air initiative with Audible and the AWG will be made on Wednesday. So keep your eyes peeled on your inbox and social media. And then the on-air in conversation panel will be happening next Monday night. So tune in for that. And I'll probably be back with, sadly to say, a new guest, a new panel in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that as well. Okay, have a great night, everyone.